Welcome to Arnie's Class Podcast. I'm Arnie Aniel. I'm an HR development consultant, an international public speaker, a workshop facilitator, a coach, and an educator. Life is a great opportunity, and we all learn life lessons every day. This podcast is all about those lessons. Lessons like gratitude, confidence, happiness, mindset, and a lot more. Learning without action is information. Learning with action is transformation. Join me, learn, and transform yourself into a better you. How is your relationships and how is your sexual life? As they say, great lovers are not born, they are made. So it means that you have to do something. You have to work on it because sexiness has to be cultivated and you need to actively focus on how you can keep your sexual passion and desire alive all the time in order for you to have that fulfilling sexual life and relationships. Whether you are single or you are in a relationship, this episode is for you because I believe you can learn something that you can apply to your relationship at the moment. Because relationship doesn't mean only relationship with other people. Relationship to yourself is also important. And of course, when you hear about sex, you always hear only that you can only have sex with someone. But of course, there's also a solo sex that you can enjoy. So maybe this is the right time to ask yourself, are you sexy enough? But it's very subjective. And how do you keep that kind of sexy feeling? It's very important. And it doesn't have to be from someone else. How about you? Do you consider yourself sexy? Because we are all sexy and they said sexiness is in your mind. Sexiness doesn't depend on your body size or body shape. Life mates, listen and learn something on how you can have that fulfilling sexual lives and relationships with my special guest. Another episode, another lesson to learn. And in this episode, my very special guest is a lecturer in social psychology at the University of Auckland. Her research focuses on factors that help couples have more fulfilling sex lives. And yes, you heard that right. Sex lives, if I may repeat, and of course, relationships. So please welcome my very special guest, Jessica Maxwell. Hi, Jess.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on and for this opportunity.
And thank you so much for saying yes to my invitation. Let's start, Jess. Can you define, of course, a lot of people heard about growth mindset, fixed mindset, all those kind of mindsets there. But I'm sure they will be surprised if we're going to talk about sexual mindset. Can you define
and
that?
I was going to say, and you've hit the nail on the head by already mentioning fixed versus growth mindset. So for those of you not familiar, I feel like fixed and growth mindset are everywhere now, right? Like they've been applied to your fitness life, to your intelligence. There's interventions on these mindsets in schools and things like this. And so fixed mindset is the idea that you can't really change something. It's sort of set in stone. Whereas growth mindset is this idea that you can really work hard to overcome challenges. So I always found those mindsets really interesting. And when I was in my PhD at the University of Toronto, I applied the idea of growth and fixed mindsets to the sexual domain. So based on broader work that we can chat about if you want on relationship destiny and growth beliefs, I developed something called sexual destiny beliefs and sexual growth beliefs. So I'll walk through what those actually are and why I think they're cool. So I think when it comes to sex, we often have this idea that if you just, find a good partner, sex should be pretty easy and wonderful. A lot of people kind of talk about things like, chemistry or that spark. And we often think that it should just sort of happen naturally. I think this is something we often see in the media, right? Like two people meet and they click, and then all of a sudden they have this amazing sex. And so I was really intrigued by this idea that sex, some people might think that sex is just, kind of something that just happens with the right partner, and that you're sort of sexually compatible with someone or you're not. So that represents sexual destiny beliefs. And some of the items I use to assess sexual destiny beliefs are items like that, like you can tell right from the get-go whether sex with someone will be satisfying or not. If a relationship's meant to be, sex should be easy and wonderful, and those ideas. So some people have that kind of idea, but at least myself, I take a much more practical view to sex and relationships. And I'm like, okay, well, like all facets of a relationship, I think your sex life takes effort and work. And it might not sound like the sexiest thing to say, but it is a part of your relationship you need to work on. So I contrast the idea of sexual destiny with the idea of sexual growth, which is that you can really put effort and work to make your sex life satisfying. So people who are high on sex growth, for them, like, a sexual dry spell or a sexual problem wouldn't really deter them, because they'd be like, oh, no worries, like we can work through that. So they're not afraid to have to put in effort into their sex life.
Okay. Let's start with the sexual growth, Jess, that you mentioned. Can you
Yes.
elaborate more on sexual growth? What do you mean by that?
Yes, yeah. So, like I was saying, it sort of really boils down to this idea that you think your sexual satisfaction with your partner is changeable. You think it's malleable. So, these people, what I found in my research is not only do they endorse this mindset or belief that, like, yeah, your sex life takes effort and work, they're actually more willing to put in effort and work into their relationship. So, this is something I and others have found in different ways. So, for example, if you believe sex takes work, you also say that you're more willing to try to make sexual compromises for your partner and kind of meet them halfway and make some sexual sacrifices. And that's one of the reasons that I tend to find that people high in sex growth have higher sexual and romantic relationship satisfaction. So, if you take away anything from this podcast, if you stop listening right now, please know that sexual growth beliefs are, well, don't stop listening, firstly. But secondly, sexual growth beliefs are really, really, like what I would say, adaptive beliefs. And so I really encourage you to kind of think about how you might be able to have more of that mindset in your sex life. So don't be afraid to think of your sex life as another area of your relationship that you might need to tend to, like a garden. You need to water your garden. You need to constantly monitor it. It's the same with your sex life.
But Jess, is it possible that they have the fulfilling and perfect and wonderful relationship, but the sex life is dry, flat, and not so awesome? Is it possible?
That's a good question. So yeah, that's something I've been really interested in as well. Like, what about people where, yeah, maybe the relationship is going really well, but your sex life is crap, or vice versa. Maybe you're in a relationship where you're having the best sex ever, but your actual, relationship and interpersonal dynamics are pretty crap. No, what I have been finding is that for people who are high in sex growth, they don't as closely associate their sex life and their relationship satisfaction. So if they're going through, some sexual problems, maybe they're feeling a bit incompatible with their partner, maybe they just had a baby, things like that. For them, that doesn't matter for the relationship satisfaction. So they're able to kind of compartmentalize any sexual issues with their relationship issues. And I think that can be kind of helpful in some regards, right? That you're not overly intertwining the two. Whereas what I find happens with those people who are high in sex destiny, who kind of think that you have a sexual soulmate and that you have natural compatibility, for them, if they start to feel like they're disagreeing with their partner in the bedroom, they end up feeling less satisfied in their relationship overall. So they're letting what happens in the bedroom bleed over to affect their relationship functioning. So to go with your example, like say someone is having bad sex, that destiny believer is going to feel crappy about their partner overall and crappy about their relationship, where someone high in growth would be like, okay, we can work through this. And they're not going to, kind of doubt that their partner's a good fit.
Okay. But just can we say that with your explanation, can we say that those people are happy with their sex lives are actually happier in their relationship rather than people who have happy relationship but sad or crap sex lives? So which one do you think in your experience and the people you've met?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like that's a really great point because In my specific research on this, I haven't necessarily kind of teased those two apart. What I have done is tried to show that these growth and destiny beliefs lead to satisfaction, and not that it's just like people who are having good sex decide to have growth beliefs. It really seems like the beliefs help foster your sexual and relationship satisfaction. I haven't necessarily looked at which causes which, but other researchers have. And there's actually often evidence for both directions that, like,
Oh,
I can imagine sexual growth believers, because they're happier in their sex life, they're probably also happier in the relationship overall. And conversely, they're having better relationships and thus are reaping better sex lives as well. So I do think it's kind of a bi-directional association for most couples.
I see.
Um, yeah.
But I've heard, especially I'm going to talk about Asian context. It's
Oh,
very
okay, perfect.
common. Yeah, it's very common that you will meet or you will talk to women who've been married for a long, long time, and they said they are happy, they have this fulfilling relationship with their husbands, but they're not having good sex, or it seems
Mm,
like
mm.
it's very seasonal. They will have it maybe this month and maybe the next one. We don't know whether it's going to happen next month or the next few weeks. Or so. What can you say about those women? Are they really saying the truth or about that? Or
That's a great point. Yeah, I was going to say, I honestly think that's very normal. And that's actually one of the items I use to assess sexual growth beliefs. Part of sexual growth beliefs is acknowledging that sexual satisfaction and sexual desire might ebb and flow over time. So I think it's really common to see, especially in women, but in any long term couple, that they're not going to have, their sex life isn't going to be linear. It's not going to, be constant. It's not going to even slowly decrease or increase. It's going to be a lot of fluctuations. And there's so many factors, right, that go into, why a couple chooses to have sex, why they're sexually satisfied. And so I think those fluctuations can be really normal, right? So for some people, their sexual satisfaction might be really might really shift depending on how the relationship is going. Whereas there's other people, it might be stress that's causing them to feel less satisfied in their sex life. Like there's so many different factors. So I think it's not a bad sign necessarily if you're having ebbs and flows in your satisfaction. But what I will say is that I think for most couples in long-term relationships, they do often express like kind of some discontent and feel like that spark has weaned a little bit, and they're often that feels distressing, where you're like, oh, I don't feel as passionate and I wish I could. So maybe I can just briefly offer some tips for people to how they can reignite the passion, if that sounds good. So a body of research now really suggests that one thing you can do to try to get the passion back is to try something new with your partner. And this doesn't even have to be in the bedroom. So it doesn't have to be trying something new in the bedroom, although of course we encourage that. And that's, something that that is linked to positives. But even just doing something new and out of the ordinary. So something exciting with your partner. So, maybe you take a dance class together, or maybe you go to a different type of restaurant that you've never been to, or maybe you just simply at home, like make a new recipe or something like that. All of those things research suggests can help you feel closer to your partner and help you feel more passionate. So when we do something new with our partner, we're like seeing them in a new light, and that can really reinvigorate our relationship and help reignite the spark. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, that like it's very normal if you're not experiencing a lot of passion in a long-term
yeah.
relationship, but one way to kind of boost it back up can often be to try those things, like get out of a rut, get out of routine, and then that can hopefully help your sexual satisfaction come back up. And this is again where I think your sexual mindset matters. So I mean, I know I'm like belaboring the point, but really just sexual growth believers are those people who are like, oh yeah, I'll put, it's no big thing that we're in a slump right now. Let's just put in some effort and we can bring it back up. Whereas someone high in sex destiny might be more likely to think like, oh no, like this means we're doomed, or like, So I think it really, like the attributions you make really matter.
So try something new.
Try something new. Yes.
Jess said try something new with your partner, not try some new partner. Okay. So please
Yes.
don't be confused. Don't be confused. Same partner, but something new, not new partner.
Exactly. Yes, yes. And it can be in the bedroom, outside the bedroom, anything.
I have another follow up because there are also some
Yeah.
women in again in Asian context that, oh, I'm old. I'm old enough for
Mm.
sex. I've been, how many times I've done that? It's the same thing anyway. Oh, I don't have any appetite for that. So, what can you say about those women?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Again, very normal because, especially, first of all, I'll say that there's not as much research as I would hope on sex and aging, especially in people like, especially following women in relationships over time. Like, there is a lot of stuff, kind of big nationwide data set saying what's your age and what's your sex life like. But I think we could do a lot more as a field to find out more about these women. We know, of course, that like there's hormonal changes going on, and that could be affecting things. But I think you just summed it up correctly too when you said like, it's kind of the same old thing, or like it's a bit of a routine. And so again, it kind of comes back to the idea that you have to try to spice things up. So one finding that I think is interesting is that some research shows that, say women who get divorced later in life, when they, speaking of new partners, when they actually start dating someone new, their sex life comes back up, right? Their desire goes back up and their satisfaction comes back up, which really suggests to me that it's not necessarily an age thing always. Of course, there is like health
Yeah.
and hormonal things that are associated with age, but I think it's often more that long-term relationship rut that's going on versus anything that's like specifically tied to age. And I think, again, as a society and also as research, we need to do better, because I've been recently seeing some studies that I think are really great that are pointing out that media really shows sexy bodies as young bodies, right? So if you think of like sex scenes in movies or even pornography or just really anything, not even those, even in romantic comedies, things like that, like we don't really see older adults as sexy. And that's not fair. They are having sex, they're having a lot of sex, and people can have really satisfying sex in older adulthood. So I think we have to kind of take some steps so that people can realize and sort of destigmatize sex in older adulthood. So I think that's important. But yeah, I think it is very normal, again, for people to be experiencing less desire when they've been with their partner for so long. And that might be a case where it is important to try some new things as part of your sexual repertoire, right? Just to shake things up.
Try something
Yeah.
new. Do something
Yes,
different.
exactly.
Spice it
It
up.
comes back to that. Yes, spice it up. Exactly.
Jess, we've been talking about sex, the desire, and things like that. So, how will you define a fulfilling sex life? How would you say that, yes, this is a fulfilling sex life?
That is such a great question. I think it's something that often needs to be like individually defined, right? Because I think it's something that is so individual. Like what I would say is a fulfilling sex life for me might look very different from something else. So, I mean, there are, I should have been prepped for this because I was going to say, like, there are some definitions of like,
Okay.
sexual fulfillment or like things like that, or finding meaning from sex. So, like, I'm sure more articulate people have like official answers, but my sense is sexual fulfillment is where, you know, you feel happy with your sex life. Like, I think it just comes back down to that. So that can include being happy that you're not having much sex. That could include being happy that your partner is doing XYZ behavior to you. And that could, you know, just really kind of encompass the gamut. So I think too, when in my research, I'm talking about like being fulfilled in your sex life or sexual well-being, oftentimes I really just ask people to kind of rate their sex life overall on broad dimensions, like how positive it is, how happy are you with your sex life? And I really try to, and I know that might sound vague to some people, but I like those items because I really think, especially when it comes to sex, there's so much individual variability that I don't want to say like, you know, how frequent was your sexual intercourse with your partner last month? Because that might alienate people of different orientations.
Mm.
Or for some people, frequency is not what it's about. It's more about quality and length of sex. And, you know, there's so much going on. So I think sometimes those really just kind of generic questions like how happy are you can go a long way. And what I like to emphasize too is that sexual fulfillment or like sexual well-being isn't just the absence of sexual disease. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I
Mm.
think for a long time people used to think like, oh, by functioning you mean just like not problematic, like you don't have a, you know, sexual dysfunction or anything like that. But that's really not, you know, the field's really recognizing it's more about pleasure. It's experiencing positive and not the absence of negatives, if that
I
makes
see.
sense.
But just have you heard, or at least have you found out what's the, I don't want, I was thinking of the word perfect, but at least what's the normal frequency for couples to have sex? Once a week?
Right.
Once a day?
Yes. I was like, oh, once a day. That's very optimistic. So there's some great research done from the University of Toronto by Dr. Amy Muse, where she has looked at some nationwide data sets, and what they have found is that on average, we know from a couple different authors, couple different research, most couples in long-term relationships have sex about once or twice a week. So that's, I feel like, pretty optimistic because that seems more doable than once a day. But my favorite thing that they found is that um, having sex once a week seems to maximize your well-being benefits. So what I mean by that is that if you kind of, I don't know, I'm a visual person. I'm imagining a graph. If on the, if you imagine
Okay. At
your
least it's
life
a graph, na?
satisfaction, yes, yeah,
Okay.
your life satisfaction, the effects of sex on life satisfaction are curvilinear, like they level off, right? So for people having sex 4 times a week doesn't produce as much increase in happiness as having sex once a week. Like there's diminishing returns to having frequent sex on your well-being, if that makes sense. So most people, it's kind of a two-pronged thing, which is great. It's like most couples are having sex once or twice a week. And on average, again, I want to emphasize this is kind of like the average trend. It's, could vary couple to couple, but on average, having sex once a week seems to maximize your well-being benefits. So I think that if, again, every couple is different, but if people force me to say a number, it's like, yeah, the once a week seems like a good average and an average that most couples find is a good sweet spot. Yeah.
So we've been talking about the fulfilling sexual lives, but how about
Yes.
those who are single, Jess?
That is, you are just like doing awesome about asking all the questions that are very much like current hot button topics in the field, which is great. So, yeah, for a long time, people kind of forgot about singles when they were thinking about sexual satisfaction. What gets tricky and is kind of not officially resolved in the literature is sometimes it's tough to know when you ask a single person, how satisfied are you with your sex life? Like, are they when they answer that? Are they talking about maybe their solo sex? Are they talking about casual sex encounters? Are they talking about they're happy not having much sex? So it can be like a really tricky measurement issue, if you will. But what the research has found is that singles who report greater sexual satisfaction, they tend to be in less of a rush to get into a relationship. So if you're single and you're having good sex, you feel happier with your single status and you feel kind of, you're less like, oh, I need a romantic partner right now. So I think that can be really, really adaptive. And I myself have done some research on casual sex in the past. And what I think is really interesting there is that it can be really satisfying for certain people and, for singles. And I think with sex and singlehood, it's important to remember that even words like casual sex, those are really umbrella terms that might conflate a lot of different experiences that might be really different in terms of how they feel psychologically and what they mean for your sex life. So for instance, people in friends with benefits relationships, and I found in sort of more like sex buddy relationships, those tend to have better outcomes than like one night stands or booty calls, if anyone uses that term anymore. So I think like singlehood and the idea of singles and sexual satisfaction is like fascinating. And I think there's so much nuance there that we're missing because again, you can, I think just intuitively, and the research supports this too, but like, I think we can all imagine that someone having like multiple one night stands, that might not be as fulfilling. Of course it might be, but it might not be as fulfilling as, having sex repeatedly with the same partner who's your friend, who gets to know what you like, and things like that. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where the research goes on sex and singlehood, especially since we know that like people are staying single for longer. We have more singles than ever before. So I think it's really like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. This is going to be like the thing to watch in the next few years.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm just thinking, you mentioned about friends with benefits and having sex with the same person repeatedly. Don't you think that it will lead, in your research or in your knowledge, does it lead to a mess up relationship because we're friends? And then what if that person dates another person. Yes, we're having sex. Yes, it's good. It's awesome, amazing. I like it. But they're also dating some people. Do you think it will lead to some more deeper problems?
Yeah, I mean, friends with benefits are tricky for all the reasons you mentioned, right? So I think what I say to people and my kind of read on the literature is that they can be really satisfying, but I think you need to be really clear with your expectations going into it. So, for instance, I think, I don't know if you've seen those movies like No Strings Attached and Friends with
Yeah.
Benefits. Those
Yes.
Hollywood movies kind of, yeah, I mean, first of all, they're great, but they kind of reinforce the idea that like, oh, you can use friends with benefits as a gateway to romantic relationships. And what the research suggests is only about 20% of friends with benefits do progress into a romantic relationship. And so not many do. If you do, your relationship seems to be just as satisfying as if you met through other more traditional means. So that's encouraging. But I just like to remind people of that. Like, if you're going into it thinking you're going to like, trick them into like falling in love with you, like, don't do that. That's going to be a recipe for disaster. But if you're kind of really acknowledging like this is a friend and you're just going to kind of engage in your hooking up and you're safe about it. So one important thing too is that usually friends with benefits aren't exclusive. So it's important to remember to be like safe. But anyways, yeah, like I think it can be satisfying. And people have found that, people in friends with benefits tend to report lots of positive emotions after the encounter. They're able to stay friends. So research suggests that if you were stronger friends before the friends with benefits started, you're more likely to stay friends after your friends with benefits breaks up. And the people who are kind of less likely to keep up on their friendship after a friends with benefits are people who feel like they were deceived during the friends with benefits relationship and stuff like that. So I think if we kind of take it on the whole, it's like, yeah, for some people, it can cause problems because maybe they're
Mm.
actually in love and it's unreciprocated. But for other people, they're able to actually maintain that friendship. Kind of, they had a friendship before, they have a friendship during, and they just had sex, and they have friendship once that sexual element subsides. But I do think it's one of those cases where, like, communication is paramount. What was interesting too is in some of my own personal research, I found that people who really want independence in relationships and who feel uncomfortable with closeness, I found that they actually were not experiencing much satisfaction in friends with benefits. Like, it was almost like a friends with benefits was like too much for them, like too close, too much romance. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So it's kind of interesting to think about friends with benefits. Like, I think they do approximate a romantic relationship in a lot of ways, but not in others. So, yeah, I think yeah, they're kind of interesting. And friends with benefits to date have received the most research in terms of casual sex. And so other forms of romantic relationships, or not romantic, other forms of casual sex relationships, say what I call sex buddies, which is more like, you're not really like super good friends, you're kind of like casual acquaintances, and like you really just hook up. You don't do other friendship activities.
Mm.
Those are less researched. So I think it'll be interesting. I feel like casual sex is constantly evolving, especially with dating apps and things like that. And, the pandemic and health concerns. Like, I think it's an area that I think needs to continue to get updated as acceptance of casual sex, increases, and just our ways of having it change as well.
Before I have a follow up about friendship, I just
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
think of masturbation. Can
Yes.
masturbation lead to a satisfying or fulfilling sexual life?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I was going to say, like, I don't know. I haven't looked too much at masturbation in my own work, but definitely I feel like many people find masturbation as part of a satisfying sex life. If anything, it's often like positively correlated with satisfaction. So, people who have high sexual desire for their romantic partner often have higher solo sexual desire as well and masturbate more frequently. To my knowledge, again, I'm not like 100% an expert on this, but from what I've seen, the only time you might see negative effects of masturbation are more if it's replacing dyadic interaction. So if you are like,
Oh, okay.
not interested in sex with your partner because you just want to maybe watch porn and masturbate, like that's when it could become more of an issue. But usually it's one of those cases where it's like masturbation can be an added bonus to your sex life
Mm,
when you're in a romantic relationship. So as
I
long as
see.
it's not sort of replacing
Affecting.
dyadic behavior.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. To my knowledge. Yeah.
About the friendship, just
Yes.
what I've
Yeah.
heard is it's very dangerous. It's okay. It's very dangerous if your partners become your best friend because they said the eroticism and the intimacy will change. It's dynamic. What do you say about the Jess? I even read it from a book by, I forgot the doctor's name, but he's kind of popular, and he said that don't
Oh.
be friends with your partners because the intimacy and eroticism between the two of you will change.
Oh, that's crazy. Okay. I was like, well, not no shade on whoever wrote this book, who I'm sure is more expert than me, but I think that's not a good like I don't think that's true because I think we know from so much other research that like feeling committed to your partner, feeling, intimate with them, feeling like you can trust them. All of those things are so important to have a satisfying relationship. And it's very common for people to say, my partner's my best friend. And we know that we get so close with our romantic partners, much like we do with our friends. So on that respect, I think it's, good if you have sort of like a friendship with your partner, but maybe what they're getting at and what is true is that sometimes familiarity and comfort are at odds with, yeah, like eroticism and passion. And so that's exactly one of the reasons I was mentioning to try something new, because research suggests that passion isn't just about how intimate you are with someone. It's actually contingent on your changes in intimacy. So you feel more passion when your intimacy increases, not when it's just high, because
Yeah.
almost all couples have high intimacy. It's when your intimacy can be boosted that you feel that boost in passion. So that's why I said like doing something new with your partner where you might learn something new about them or connect with them, like doing like skydiving or going to a new restaurant, whatever.
Okay. But
All of
not do
those
it in a
things.
restaurant, okay? Just
Yeah,
go in
don't
the
skydive.
restaurant, and then if you want to do it, go back home first.
Yes, yes, please. I mean, unless you're into that, I don't know the laws. Yeah, but exactly. Anything like that can really boost your intimacy, which is then going to boost your passion. And I mean, I think I get the sentiment behind that idea. And it's similar to some stuff that Esther Perel says, the couples therapist. Like,
Yes.
it's like you kind of need a bit of mystery to have desire. But I don't think from my perspective and my read on a lot of the literature is that doesn't mean don't be friends with your partner or don't share stuff with them. It just means like maybe sometimes keep a bit of mystery or, again, do new things to see them in a new sexy light. But really being able to like share things with your partner and feeling comfortable with them is really important to have a successful relationship. And it's funny you say that too, because I saw something, maybe it was on Twitter recently, about how like there hasn't been as much research as you would think on couples who are friends first who then
That's right.
start dating. So there's a little bit, but not a ton. So I think like in the future, it'll be interesting for us to kind of look at like, were you friends first or did you become friends after? And things like that. But yeah, I would say be friends with your romantic partner, but then just take those actions to sometimes spice things up.
Jess, I have
Yeah.
actually another follow up, but I just remembered someone came to
Yeah.
me. He's let's just say he's in probably early 70s and
Oh,
been
okay.
with his wife for many, many, many years. Let's just say probably 30, more than 30 years. And he
Yes.
told
Yeah.
me that, Annie, I don't have that kind of, let me put it that way. The feelings towards his wife is like sister. He said that's how he
Gotcha.
feels towards his wife. It's like a sister, and he doesn't have the erection. But with other women that he sees, still the same. But with the wife, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's a routine. We've been doing it for many, many years. So what can I do? So, Jess, how will you help this guy?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, first I will say I'm not a couples therapist or sex therapist. I just research. So
Yeah, no, based
don't
only on
quote
the
me on this.
sexual lives.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So what I was going to say is I think again that is common. So losing some of the passion, you can also think of it in terms of like Sternberg's triangular theory of love, which says that, you might lose passion, but keep your intimacy and commitment. So you might have more of like a companionate
Mm.
type relationship. So I think that can happen where the passion is faded. And so it's not that different from other forms of friendships. And again, that's where I think it's hard when you've been in a long-term relationship and when you're older, but I think it's really, again, like a time where you have to really put effort in your sex life. And so kind of linking back all those ideas we've already talked about, really realizing you have to put effort and work, and that again, you might need to try some new things. You might have to, like work to really see your partner in a sexy light and not in that role. So a lot of people will report that, when you become married or become a mom or things like that, you sort of feel like your erotic role is being downplayed, and that things get too familiar or too routine. So I think it's a very common thing to happen. And I think it's just, again, that you really kind of have to put in that effort and try new things and be really open, right? And communication and things like that. And I think it's very natural that's happening.
Especially those number of years, right?
Yes. Yeah. Good on them for staying together that long.
I'm really excited to this because I keep on like getting questions in my head.
Oh, good.
Yeah. No,
Yes.
Jess.
One of the things I was gonna. Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Go
no,
for
Jess.
it.
Please go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking too, when we were talking about this idea of your partner being your friend and things like that, I think one of the things I'd add as well is that I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of like the all or nothing marriage, or it's
Oh,
called the
yes.
suffocation model of marriage. So one of the ideas from that I think applies here too is this idea that now, like, we have such high expectations for romantic relationships, and we want our partner to fulfill everything. This is again something Esther Perel talks about as well. Like, we want them to be our biggest supporter, our cheerleader, our great parent, partner, blah 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 blah. And so I think sometimes all of those expectations and expecting someone to fulfill all of those roles can detract from desire. So I don't think the answer is necessarily to not be friends with your partner, but what I think you could do, for instance, is make sure that you also have other friends that you can talk to about some of your issues, right? So I think it's like spread the wealth, like your partner should be your friend, but you have to make sure you also have other social supports that you can go to as well, so that you can keep some things,
That's a very good point.
sacred.
Yeah, Jess. Not
Yeah,
only to your partner, like your family, some friends. Yeah,
exactly.
that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Your community, exactly.
Jess, how about those? Of course, if especially with men, if they are not really satisfied with their sexual life with their wife, there's at least, again, in the Asian context, I don't want to generalize with what I know and the people I've met. A lot of them, they of course they have their mistresses, they have their love affairs, those kind of thing. So women, most of the time, they lose their interest to have sex again with their
Mm,
husbands after those things happen. It's for them, they said, oh, I can't imagine doing it again with my husband, because every time we do it,
right.
I can always remember that he did this to another woman. So I
Yes.
can't
Yeah.
concentrate. I don't enjoy it. So what do you say about that, Jess?
Yeah, and I was going to say, I could imagine the same too, even if the gender roles are flipped, right? That, like,
Yes.
if I think that's why it's important, that, like, yeah, I don't know too much about like specific cultural context and things like that. And it's not 100% my expertise, but what I would say is that this is again why I think it's important for couples to be honest with communication. And so I think how that could be avoided is having a consensually non-monogamous relationship versus the husband like cheating with a mistress or something like that, right? So if both couple members up front agree that it's okay for them both to have other sexual encounters, I think that would be kind of like the best outcome, where that can often improve their main relationship and their main sex life, but no one's cheating in. Because I'd be curious in some of those cases whether it's because, I have a feeling that some of those feelings would be because your partner's betrayed you, and
Mm.
less about, oh, he's done this behavior to someone else. It's more like, he did this behind my back. The trust has been violated. Da, 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 da. So, yeah, I think potentially exploring that option before could be really useful. But yeah, I don't think I have a really good answer for that, other than like, I think it's like, yeah, you got to learn how to trust your partner again, and hopefully over time the spark can come back with effort and work, right?
Yes, yes. Of course, we're talking already like about sexual mindset, and then you mentioned about sexual growth, and then you also mentioned about sexual destiny.
Yes.
Okay. What is that, Jess?
Yeah, so sexual destiny, like I've kind of been looking at it, uh, it's not necessarily the opposite of sexual growth, but that's often how I talk about it just for kind of simplicity's sake. But sexual destiny is really this idea that you think you'll know, from the first sexual encounter, whether sex with someone will be great or not. So, these are people who kind of put a lot of stock in the quality of their early sexual relationship with someone. And as I've sort of alluded to, these people allow what's happening in the bedroom to bleed over to the relationship overall. So, what I found in my own research is that when these people are saying they're disagreeing with their partner in the bedroom, they start to doubt whether their partner is a good fit for them. And then they feel less satisfied in their relationship. So I often think of these people as endorsing the idea of like having a sexual soulmate. And so if something happens in their sex life, like maybe they haven't had sex in a while or they don't seem to be on the same page, they really take that to heart and think, oh no, my partner's not a good fit. And that can lead to lower relationship satisfaction. I think though, it's important to remember that the idea of destiny isn't always bad. So, these people often have higher desire. They like really kind of place a lot of importance on their sex life, which can be good in some ways. Um, but it's really just the part that worries me is that I think for these people, everything's good as long as their sex life's good. But
Yeah.
when problems start to arise, that's when the cracks start to show in the sexual destiny beliefs. Um, but the good news is, in my research, I've been able to move people's beliefs around a little bit, as have others. So by telling people, like even your listeners, learning about some of the benefits of sexual growth and potentially some of the drawbacks of sex destiny, that will hopefully help them kind of think about their own sexual mindset and think about how they may want to try to adopt more of a growth mindset. Yeah.
Just with your answer, you mentioned about sexual soulmate. Are
Yes. Yeah.
how can they do like an assessment that yes, she is, yes, he is my sexual soulmate? Are there any signs or what can they do that will tell them he is the one, she is the one?
That's a good question. And that's, I think, I don't think we have a good understanding of like what makes sexual destiny believers like confident they're with a good partner. I think what we do know from some of the items is it's things like not having problems or not having disagreements. And yeah, like I would, speaking kind of just my gut, is that it's probably things like really just compatibility. Also, probably it's a gut instinct for them, like we click, and things are probably fairly easy. And, so I'm sure these are people who probably just had satisfying sex with having never, maybe not having to like
Mm.
talk about it or really work at it. So I think they just kind of, if they have good sex with someone who they're in a relationship with and they didn't really have to, yeah, no problems happened, anything like that. I think they'll probably be like, oh, it's a sexual soulmate, or like, oh, we seem to have like really aligned interests. They must be my sexual soulmate. But it's definitely something we should explore further. Yeah, because I would love to know what leads people to believe they're with a sexual soulmate. I personally, if you want to, I was gonna say, I don't think, to be very clear, I don't think people have a sexual soulmate. If that makes sense. Like, I think it's one of those things that you can have a certain level of compatibility with someone, but I think you can always work to improve it. Whereas I think, yeah, like I think this idea, even beyond the sex domain, just in general, the idea of the one, I think is something that maybe is a little bit kind of reinforced by the media and not necessarily real life, I guess.
Okay. Jess, we talk about already the sexual fulfillment. How about relationship fulfillment? How can they have that kind of fulfilling relationships?
Yeah, like I mean, I think there's so many factors, and I'm sure some of your other podcasts speak to this, but in terms of kind of the biggest factors that I think lead to satisfying relationships, I think it comes down to two things. I mean, there's more than that, but the two I like to kind of focus on are communication and commitment. Um, Commitment is just this idea that like once you commit to a partner, so many good things happen. And we're once you're committed, you're motivated to see your partner in a better light. You're motivated to try to handle conflict constructively. You're motivated to compromise with them. You see them as better than anyone else in the world does. And so commitment can really provide like a beneficial rose-colored glasses to your relationship. And it's really, I mean, as I feel like it's in the name, but commitment, is one of the things that predicts staying together long term. It's like one of the best predictors. The other main thing, though, I think that we can't overlook is communication, and I feel like that's come up even when we've been talking about certain
Yeah.
aspects of people's sex lives, because I think it's one of those things, like, you can be, if we believe in the idea of the one, I think you could be with your soulmate, but if you can't handle conflict, if you can't, talk about the division of household chores, if you can't talk about parenting choices, all of those things, it's so important for your relationship longevity. So I feel like, if people need areas of the relationship to work on, I think the most bang for your buck is work on your communication, because not only will communicating better in your relationship help you long term, it'll also help your sex life. It'll probably help all your relationships. Like, becoming a better communicator, I think, is just a great thing in all aspects of life, but especially in relationships.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. That's very well said. And I'm sure they will remember that. Two C's:
I hope so.
communication and commitment.
Commitment. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Jess, you've been sharing a lot, and I know my life mates, as I call my listeners, my life mates, I'm sure are learning a lot from this episode. But of course, we have to end. We cannot go on and on and on and talk, because even they said even the beautiful things have come to an end. So
I love
normally
that.
I have questions for my guest, Jess, and these are my three standard questions. And one of that is
Oh,
like,
sure.
yeah, what is, with your experiences, with all the researches and the people you've met in your life, what do you consider the greatest lesson you've learned?
Oh, geez.
Oh, gee, I saw your reaction there.
Yeah,
Jess.
that's a tough one to end off with. From all the people I've met, all my experiences, the biggest thing I've learned, the biggest lesson I've learned, feel like it's not related to my research necessarily, but um, one of the things I think is just being humble, I think, is the most important thing. Be humble and acknowledge what you don't know. I think that's so important, whether we're talking about research, whether we're talking about, debating world issues with someone. Just be humble and be open about what you don't know, and be, like, willing to learn new things. I think it's kind of all tied together. Like, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest lessons, I guess. That's not the best answer, but it's what came to mind.
No, I know, because we've learned a lot of lessons. It's not, of course, it's very difficult to single out only one lesson,
Yes.
but I believe
Yes.
humility is something that nowadays I think is hard to find.
I agree. I agree. It's
Everybody's
so
an
important.
expert
Yeah. Yeah.
with social media. Okay. Just the second one. Of course, every day is a day that we make decisions, we make choices. What particular one huge decision you've made in the past and has an impact
Ooh.
of who you are at the moment?
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's so many big decisions. One
Yes.
of them that is kind of salient is I made a decision to take a job in New Zealand, even though I'm from Canada. And so my partner and I kind of moved across the world, not really knowing anyone here. And I think it was such a valuable experience. I mean, definitely we were trying something new, that's for sure. To bring it back to research, definitely did that. And I think it was such a good learning and growing opportunity. And I think one of the things I've really appreciated here is the New Zealand people, and the way of life here has just given me unique insight and just a broader perspective, and really kind of reminded me of the importance of cultural diversity, of being inclusive in research, also of being sustainable and caring about the planet, and just so many different things. So I feel like, yeah, moving to New Zealand was a great decision, and one that I think will shape me for many years to come.
Wow. But just your researches are done in Canada or in New Zealand?
So most of the research I spoke about today was kind of some of my older research that was done in Canada and a little bit in the States. I do have research currently ongoing in New Zealand, but because of COVID, it keeps like starting and stopping. So I don't have much research yet from New Zealand. But what I can say is the research I've seen so far really seems quite parallel to what I was finding in Canada as well.
Ah, I see. Have you met
Yeah.
any Asian, or at least have you worked with people from Asian countries and
Yes.
discuss about
Yeah.
sex life or relationships?
Yeah. So what's great is that both Toronto and Auckland, where I currently am, so I did grad school in Toronto, and then I'm like now a senior lecturer here in Auckland. And both of these cities are great because they're really multicultural and have people from various different countries. And so what I've loved is when I have students from different parts of the world, like especially Asia, tell me different things and different norms. And so I think that's really helpful because sometimes it'll help kind of show me some of my blind spots. I'll be like, oh, I never thought of it that way, or like, oh, that's really interesting. So I always try to include some research from that is coming out of Asia in my teachings and things like that. And I just love learning from the students, right? I like a very open, again, back to humility. I'm very open and honest where it's like, oh, I didn't know about that. Do you tell me? You're the one who's had lived experience. Like, how can, how might things be different? How might things be the same? And it's also a good reminder because one thing I do take for granted is I'm very comfortable talking about relationships and sex, but not everybody is, right? And so oftentimes there'll be students who say, my upbringing, this is very taboo. So it's hard for me to talk about things in
Yeah.
class and share things. So it's been really useful to know that so that I now kind of take a lot of different approaches to try to make everyone feel comfortable and do some things anonymously so people feel comfortable sharing their voices. But yeah, I would, we should keep in touch because I would love to collect more data in Asia and learn more things there. Because right now it's like, yeah, I get snippets of it from students, but I haven't done a full deep dive. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. If you're going to have a research for Asian context, just let me know.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Because I would love to look at sexual mindsets and if they're different, around the world. And one thing that I'm always reminded of is both sex research and relationship research. Recent reviews have come out showing that they do focus heavily on Western cultures, which I think is a big limitation. So, like, I can't with confidence say that all of my results would replicate, in different cultural contexts because it just hasn't been done. And that's like the same with a lot of research.
Yeah.
Although there is some great work, to be clear, there's some great work being done on these topics in Asia for sure. But I think we just need to do more of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with the countries with very strong religious beliefs,
Yes, yes.
like
And I
the
think what we need to
Philippines,
do, the Philippines, yes, yes.
very
I was going
strong
to say,
Catholicism there.
yes, and I was raised Catholic, so I feel you on that. And I feel like Catholic guilt and like religiosity and sex could be a whole other podcast. And one of the things I want to do a better job of too is like amplifying the voices of people who are in those countries doing that research, right? Because it's so much more valuable for them to do that research when they know they're part of the community versus me trying to go in and be like, impose my views or things like that. So yeah, let's someone needs to do more research
Yeah, me
in some
too.
of those
That's why
countries. Yeah.
I'm reading actually a book about how to integrate sexuality and religion, spirituality and
Ah,
sexuality.
yes. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
And
because
I feel like
I'm
there's so
also a
many cool.
practicing Catholic.
Ah, yes. Okay. Yeah. And like I was gonna say, that's like, and I think I love that you say that too, because really there's so many things that they don't need to be incompatible, right? Like, and and spirituality can be so important. And like there's certain concepts that I could see working well across both. And yeah, that's awesome. That's really
Yes.
cool. I'll be curious to learn more about what you find. That's awesome.
Yeah, we will see. My last question, Jess, a part of my
Yeah.
standard questions. If you or someone else is going to write a book about your life,
Oh,
well, I
I was
always
like, I
get that
like this.
I always get that reaction from my guests. What will be the book like, and what will be the title?
Oh my gosh. Um, I feel like it would be called accidental sex researcher because that's kind of, yeah, my upbringing was very Catholic. And, I didn't get sex ed in school and things like that. And I just kind of happened upon a sexuality class in undergrad. And that kind of paved the way for me to do grad school and now teach this. So I feel very fortunate that I ended up in this thing. And I think hopefully what would happen, I mean, I feel like hopefully my life right now is just like the first few chapters of the book. But hopefully it would kind of show that my research has hopefully helped people. Cause that's, I think, what I would care most about is like, don't worry about, like, I don't care about me or like my life story. I think what's more interesting is if I can like give back and help others. So hopefully that would be part of the book. And hopefully it would have like a catchy, beautiful title, because we know people care about that when they're looking for books.
That's right. Jess, of course, one last message, especially to
Of
the
course.
young ones, because you know what happened with pandemic, and nowadays the dating
Yes.
world has changed. It's totally different compared to what it was before and what it is now. A lot of people go
Yeah.
to, dating apps. That's how they meet
Yes.
people, and then they cyber sex and do things like that. In order to have that fulfilling sexual life and relationship, what is your advice to the young people?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right too. With like, I think it's great that online dating is becoming more prevalent, and all of that. I think my main advice would be just uh, don't feel pressure. I think right now with apps like Tinder, sometimes people feel like they have to casually date and have casual sex and things like that. And that's not going to lead to the best outcomes. Like, just kind of like, don't, I think it's like, maybe this sounds like patronizing or like too old, but I was going to say, like, don't rush, and don't feel like you need to, don't do anything you're not comfortable with. Do stuff that you feel comfortable with. Like, if you want to have a million one night stands on Tinder, like, you go girl, or you go boy, like, go for it if you're safe, being safe. But if that's not something you're comfortable with, don't feel like you need to. And I think also don't be afraid of online dating. It's so common, and the research that's coming out is saying like it's just as satisfying, if not sometimes more, as people have met through other means. So I think we're seeing the stigma of online dating go down, which is great. So
Yes,
yeah, I don't know if
yes.
that's the best advice for young people, but just yeah, don't feel peer pressure. That sounds like a very after school special message, but
Yeah. For as long as it's safe and take precautionary measures, right?
exactly, exactly. And especially during times of COVID, like be careful.
Once again, Jess, thank you so, so much for your time, for your knowledge, and for sharing all your experiences, not in sex, but of course in the researches.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed, and those were really great. I don't think I've been asked as good and intense questions as those last three. Those are very, very good.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. And of course, I'm sure that all my life mates will learn something from this episode.
I hope so. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. So, once again, life mates, you've learned something from today's episode. And remember this: a fulfilling sex life and relationship is just like any other aspects of your life. It takes effort. You have to do something about it. It doesn't happen naturally. You have to do something about it. If you want to have that sexual life that is fulfilling in a relationship, do something about it. And whether you're a man, you're a woman, you're transgender, whatever sexuality or gender you have, it's the same for all of us. And we all deserve a fulfilling sexual life and a fulfilling relationship. Again, enjoy life and do whatever it takes to make your sexual life and relationship fulfilling. Thank you so much again to my next episode. Enjoy, listen, and learn.